Hello, YouTube divers. This is WaterDive 122, and I want to welcome you back to episode 13 of Magic Metal Mondays. This special edition episode where I rank R.E.M's albums worst to best. Yesterday, we went through numbers 15 through 8, and today we are going from number 7 all the way to number 1. So, let's hop right into it. Number 7, the 2008 album Accelerate. Now, this might be a controversial pick, putting this album over R.E.M's first 3 albums, but for me, this album is very underrated. It's definitely one of their most heavier albums, one of those stadium rock records that just sounds heavily distorted, and I know a lot of people, especially a lot of R.E.M fans, kind of hold back against the heavily distorted guitars that Peter Buck does on albums like Accelerate, New Adventures, and of course, Monster. Um, but I personally don't mind the distorted guitars because, I'm a metalhead and I'm quite used to distorted guitars, but they are very interesting coming from a band like R.E.M. But there are some really great tracks on here. The first 3 songs off this album, Living Well is the Best Revenge, Man-Sized Wreath, and Supernatural Super Serious. All of those songs are great, and of course, Supernatural Super Serious is one of my favorite R.E.M songs. I really love live versions of that song, to be honest. Mr. Richards is also off of this record. That's an amazing song. I think the songs Houston and Horse to Water are 2 underrated songs. I like those songs a lot. So yeah, with that said, Accelerate's a really underrated album. I think it's their most underrated album. So yeah, it comes here at number 7. Number 6, the 1994 album Monster. Speaking of heavily distorted guitar tones, this album definitely has a lot of distorted guitars and lots of distortion pedals and stuff like that. Um, and like I said with Accelerate, I don't mind the distorted guitars. Let's see. So this album definitely has a lot of classics on here, like What's the Frequency, Kenneth, Crush with Eyeliner, and Bang and Blame. Very, very 90s, if you will. But my favorite song on here, which is another single off this album, Strange Currencies. Beautiful, 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 beautiful song. It kicks a punch. It's definitely my favorite. It's definitely my favorite song off of Monster. So with that said, Monster coming in at number 6. Number 5, the 1987 album Document. Now, yeah, don't. It's not just the 2 singles that are off of this album, which are It's the End of the World as We Know It and The One I Love. 2 frequently played radio songs. But I also love Don't Go to Rockville. I believe that's what it's called. Welcome to the Occupation and The Finest Work song. All those songs are really good. It's not just those. And plus the drums are a little bit heavy on this album. And like I said, I don't mind the heavy drum tones at all. But like I said with the guitar tones on albums like Monster and Accelerate, New Adventures, and Hi-Fi, I don't mind that heavy use of drums. And, in some songs, like the one I love, the drum tones work out pretty freaking well, in my opinion. So, with that said, Document coming here at number 5. Number 4, the 1986 album Life's Rich Pageant. Yep. This is a freaking classic R.E.M. album. Where do I even begin with this album? I mean, for one thing, it's got freaking Fall on Me on it, one of R.E.M's greatest songs. Flowers of Guatemala is a beautiful, beautiful ballad. Let's see. I believe the opening track of this album, Begin to Begin. I think that's the name of the song. It's also really good. Love the album. Love this song. There's just a lot of stuff on this album that I can enjoy. And so, mean, even though it doesn't really have the strongest vocal performances from Michael Stipe, in my opinion, he still sings amazingly on all of R.E.M's albums, to be exact. Um, Michael Stipe is such a unique singer. I don't really know any other singer that sounds just like him, or sounds or sings in the exact same tone as he does, or technique. Um, and of course, Mike Mills. He's a great backup vocalist, and he's a great bass player. Peter Buck is one of the most is if you want to learn how to do guitar arpeggios, then he's the guitar player to learn from. And of course, Bill Berry on the drums. He also has a great voice because he also sings backup from time to time, especially on the song "Fall on Me." Um, but all four musicians on for R.E.M. absolutely do a fine job on this album, and this is pretty much when this band is in their prime. So these next three albums expand R.E.M. to a whole new level. So let's find out what they are. Number 3, the 1988 album Green. What a freaking album this is. I mean, for one thing, you have two classic R.E.M. songs in Orange Crush and Stand. Another pair of my favorite R.E.M. songs. Pop Song 89. It's good. But it's Orange Crush and Stand. Especially Stand. Stand is probably my favorite song off the album. And it definitely has some of R.E.M's strongest performances, especially on the song Orange Crush. A lot of people might say that Orange Crush is kind of repetitive, but it's also catchy, and it is catchy. And yeah, it can be a little bit repetitive at times, because it's the same verses, the same chorus, but in that little bridge, Michael Stipe does a little megaphone rap verse, and in my opinion, that's freaking insane. So, yeah. Green from 1988 comes here at number 3. Number 2, the 1992 album Automatic for the People. This is probably a lot of people's number 1 for R.E.M., and I totally get that. I mean, it has classic songs. A lot of R.E.M. standout material is on here, like Man on the Moon, The Sidewinder Sleeps Tonight, let's see, Night Swimming. What a beautiful ballad that is. The song Drive is also off this album. So right there, that's 4 classic R.E.M. songs, and I love every single one of them. There's, in my mind, there's not a bad song on this album. Like, the worst songs on this album, at the very least, are below average. There's not a song on this album that is absolutely terrible. But the main reason, but I could have put this one at number 1, but I didn't but I did not do that for 2 reasons. Number 1, the number 1 album is one of my favorite albums of all time, and honestly, introduced me to R.E.M. And number 2, this album is, Automatic for the People is way longer than the number 1 spot. So mainly because of length, I gotta keep it at number 2. But this is one of those albums where the crazy length of an album works out. So this is a classic album. It's a classic alternative rock album. But we're gonna get into number 1. So here we go. Number 1, Process of Elimination. We have reached it. This is one of my top 10 favorite albums of all time, and if you remember from my top 10 favorite albums video, this one was at number 10. Yes, the 1991 album Out of Time. This was mainly the album that introduced me to R.E.M. because my For one thing, my favorite REM song is on here, which is Shiny Happy People. And I actually first heard this as a parody version on the show Sesame Street when R.E.M. was featured doing Furry Happy Monsters. And then one day it turned out that it was actually a parody of this song, and so I checked it out. Didn't disappoint. And of course, the classic Losing My Religion is also on this album. Near Wild Heaven is also great. Texarkana and Half a World Away. And of course, Me and Honey. The instrumental Endgame is also on here. The song Low. There's only one song off of this album that is absolutely horrible, and that is the KRS. Oh, and that's the KRS-One featured radio song. That opens up this album, and I'm really disappointed that the radio song opens up this album because it's so very, 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 very bad. I wouldn't have minded if R.E.M. just put that one on a B-side and have Losing My Religion open up this album. But Losing My Religion definitely saves this album for sure. And of course, the other standout tracks of Endgame, Near Wild Heaven, of course, Shiny Happy People, Texarkana, Me and Honey, and Low, if I didn't mention that already. And Half a World Away. All those songs, amazing. I love this album. And so with that said, Out of Time from 1991 comes in here at number 1. So there you go. And with that all being said, that is my entire ranking of the R.E.M. catalog studio albums. So with that said, thank you so much for watching, my fellow YouTube divers. This is Water Dive 122 signing out, ready to dive into more fun on YouTube. Thanks for watching.